The cause of death was listed as a single gunshot wound, but the medical examiner disagreed upon closer examination of bullet trajectory and entry point angles. Forensic analysis revealed that the angle of entry identified on the deceased's body did not match the original assessment provided by first responders at the scene. The sequence of events was critical in understanding the dynamics leading to the fatal injury. Upon initial arrival, first responders noted a singular wound consistent with an exit rather than an entrance based on their preliminary examination. However, forensic ballistic evidence and subsequent analysis of bullet trajectory indicated that the entry angle suggested a different orientation of the deceased at the time of shooting compared to what was initially assumed. This discrepancy prompted further investigation into potential movement or positioning changes between the moment of discharge and the arrival of medical personnel, ultimately altering the interpretation of the incident's timeline and contributing factors. However, forensic ballistic evidence and subsequent analysis of bullet trajectory indicated that the entry angle suggested a different orientation of the deceased at the time of shooting compared to what was initially assumed. Chapter: Case Background. The incident occurred on a residential street in suburban Detroit on March 15 at approximately 8:47 p.m., when a passerby reported an unusual disturbance to local law enforcement. The caller described hearing multiple gunshots and observing a parked vehicle with its engine running, but no occupants visible inside or outside the car. Upon arrival, officers discovered a set of keys in the ignition and a cellular phone on the passenger seat, indicating recent occupancy. The responding patrol unit found the deceased slumped over in the driver's seat, exhibiting signs of trauma consistent with gunshot wounds. No other individuals were present at the scene, nor were there any apparent witnesses to the event. Initial assumptions by law enforcement suggested that the shooting may have been an isolated incident involving a single victim and no suspects identified at the time of discovery. Further investigation revealed the vehicle had not moved from its position since the initial report, leading investigators to conclude that the deceased was likely shot while inside the car or immediately prior to entering it. Chapter: Initial findings upon arrival at the scene. First responders noted a male individual lying supine in a residential living room. The deceased exhibited no visible entry wounds upon preliminary inspection, but was observed to have an extensive abrasion overlying the thoracic region consistent with clothing displacement or a foreign object passage. Emergency medical services reported diminished responsiveness and pronounced cardiopulmonary arrest at the scene, leading to immediate classification of the manner of death as undetermined pending further investigation. Initial observations did not reveal any signs of forced entry or struggle indicative of a violent confrontation. However, a firearm was discovered approximately 1 meter from the deceased's left hand, which prompted forensic investigators to initiate a more thorough examination. Given these circumstances and the absence of clear entrance wounds, an analysis of potential bullet trajectory and angle of entry became critical for understanding the mechanism of death. Chapter: Forensic investigation upon arrival at the scene. A thorough examination revealed multiple casings consistent with semi-automatic handgun discharge, indicating an altercation likely occurred within close proximity to where the deceased was found. Given these circumstances and the absence of clear entrance wounds, an analysis of potential bullet trajectory and angle of entry became critical for understanding the mechanism of death. Forensic teams meticulously collected bullet fragments and residue from various surfaces, including walls and the floor, noting their spatial distribution relative to the body's position. The deceased exhibited a single entry wound on the left chest consistent with a downward trajectory at approximately 45 degrees. Notably absent were defensive wounds or signs of struggle elsewhere on the body, suggesting an unexpected encounter. All collected evidence was cataloged and sealed in accordance with the chain of custody protocols to ensure integrity and prevent contamination prior to laboratory analysis. Upon recovery of the deceased, a thorough examination was conducted to determine the trajectory and angle of entry for the fatal gunshot wound. Radiographic imaging, including CT scans and X-rays, provided initial data on bullet path and fragmentation patterns within the thoracic cavity. Histological analysis of tissue samples from the entry site revealed irregular lacerations consistent with high-velocity impact. Microscopic examination identified the presence of metallic residue and carbonized particles at a concentration indicative of close-range fire. Hemoglobin degradation products were detected in the periphery of wound margins, confirming arterial disruption. Using established forensic ballistics standards, measurements were taken to calculate the angle of entry at approximately 35 degrees relative to the sagittal plane. These findings corroborate the conclusion that the projectile entered obliquely from a lateral position, causing significant tissue damage and hemorrhage. Forensic examination of the scene revealed a single gunshot wound to the deceased, indicating a probable homicide. Analysis of bullet trajectory, based on entry and exit wounds, as well as blood spatter patterns, suggested the shooter was positioned at an elevated angle relative to the victim. Through microscopic analysis of soil samples found adhering to the bullet casing, investigators determined the approximate time of death to be between 10 p.m. and midnight, aligning with witness statements, placing individuals in the vicinity during that period. Analysis of bullet trajectory, based on entry and exit wounds, as well as blood spatter patterns, suggested the shooter was positioned at an elevated angle relative to the victim. This timeline corroborated surveillance footage showing the deceased entering the building at approximately 9:45 p.m., followed by a lone individual who matched the shooter's description. The postmortem interval was calculated using body temperature and rigor mortis stages, confirming death occurred within 1 hour of the last sighting of the deceased alive, thus reinforcing the established sequence of events. The analysis of bullet trajectories provides critical information regarding the positioning and movement of both the shooter and the deceased at the moment of discharge. Examination of entry wounds and trace evidence such as powder burns and stippling patterns indicated a close-range shooting, likely within 1 meter. The angle of entry was determined to be approximately 45 degrees from the right side of the body towards the anterior, suggesting the shooter was positioned slightly above and to the left relative to the deceased. This finding is corroborated by spatter patterns on surrounding surfaces. While the precise position of the shooter cannot be definitively established without additional contextual evidence, the trajectory analysis narrows the probable range of positions significantly. Under oath, an expert would affirm these findings as consistent with a single shooter operating from a higher vantage point, aiming downwards and slightly leftwards towards the deceased. Chapter Resolution. The analysis of bullet trajectories, in this case, led to a definitive identification of the angle of entry for the projectile that caused fatal injury to the deceased. Initially, the nature of trauma suggested a horizontal line of fire. However, subsequent examination of wound characteristics and ballistic testing indicated an upward trajectory. This was confirmed through precise measurement of exit angles relative to the body's position at impact. The recovered bullet fragment corroborated this finding, revealing striations consistent with travel along a 35-degree incline. Furthermore, environmental factors such as room layout and furniture placement were meticulously documented and reconstructed digitally. These reconstructions demonstrated that the angle of entry was indeed oblique rather than horizontal. This shift in understanding was critical for interpreting witness statements more accurately and aligning them with physical evidence. The final trajectory analysis provided a clear narrative of events leading to the deceased's fatal injury, resolving key uncertainties regarding perpetrator positioning and movement during the incident. In conclusion, this case exemplifies the importance of comprehensive bullet trajectory analysis in establishing accurate cause and manner of death. This analysis underscores the critical role of precise bullet trajectory assessment in determining the angle and direction of entry, essential for reconstructing the sequence of events at a shooting scene. Such methodologies provide robust evidence pivotal to investigative accuracy. The file remains open,